Hello and welcome back to the Science Revision Masterclass. So I've got here the sheet that I was using last time that I posted a video, having gone through cells, cell division, transport, and then a little bit onto human biology with enzymes and digestion. You'll note that some of the topics I've noted down where we might get 6 mark or slightly longer answer questions. That doesn't mean that nothing else could appear as one of those things, but what I tried to do was break the topics down a little bit so that you could go away and use the slides B1 everything to start to have a look at your revision for those. So hopefully what you've done since then, make some flashcards on those things and started to learn some of these facts. You might have moved on to having a look at some questions. So now I'm going to continue on with what we are talking about and move on to the next set of topics. Now, because I'm talking about human biology, I'm going to try and run the human biology along the bottom here. I'm just going to put down here the heart and blood vessels. Now, gas exchange is in that as well, but I'm going to pop gas exchange and ventilation up here because that links in with transport up the top. So I'm going to keep those things together there, and then I'm going to put some plant things down the side over there. So this is a topic in itself, so I'm going to put that there. Now, the heart is something that I think is quite simple to do. I'm going to try and draw a heart. I'm not very good at art, as those of you who I've taught know, but we've got the sort of heart structure down here. So we've got the septum in the middle, like that, and we've got the walls of the ventricles there. We've got some valves, and we've got the atria up the top, and we've got our blood vessels coming out like that. So you need to have a diagram of the heart, and you need to label the structure of the heart and the arteries and veins at the top. You need to know about the septum, you need to know where the pacemaker is in there, and you need to know why one side of the heart is thicker than the other. So that's the heart. You just need to find a diagram and make sure that you're able to label it. What people often forget is not just to talk about the structure of the heart, but to talk about its function. Now that's a link over here to respiration, because we need to understand response to exercise. And we need to understand why it is that the heart plays such a crucial role and why your heart rate would increase. And that links to respiration over there. So I'm going to talk about it when I do respiration rather than talking about it now. The other thing we need to talk about is when the heart goes wrong. Okay, so we've got heart diseases and we've got problems with the heart. So we need to be able to talk about valves, and we need to be able to talk about replacements, both biological and mechanical. You also need to be able to talk about pacemakers. I spelt it wrong there, well done me. You need to be able to talk about pacemakers, artificial hearts. You'd also need to be able to talk about drugs that help. So we would have statins because they reduce cholesterol and stop fat building up in the arteries. And also we'd need to be able to talk about stents. Now all of these things are things that you can just look up. They're on the set of slides. I'm pointing over there because they're on my laptop in front of me. And you just need to make some flashcards so that you know some facts about these things. So you've done the heart. You've looked at what the heart does. You've looked at what a pacemaker does. You've then looked at problems with the heart. You maybe understand what a heart attack is. You would be looking at that when you looked at stents and statins. And you understand the heart's response to exercise, but that comes in another topic over there. We then need to talk about blood vessels. Now, there are 3 that you need to be able to talk about. You need arteries, you need veins, and you need capillaries. Now, arteries always go away from the heart, arteries away, and we've got veins and they contain valves. V for valves, A for away. That often helps. You need to use the word lumen when you're talking about the space in the middle. So arteries have a smaller lumen. I should have used a pencil there because this is likely to go wrong because I can't draw. Got a small lumen, got a really thick muscular wall around the outside because they run at high pressure and they need to be able to contract to keep that pressure up. Veins, on the other hand, huge lumen, very, very thin muscular wall. They're at low pressure and they need to be able to get the blood to flow. Because it's at low pressure, where you've got things like long veins running up the back of your legs, there are valves inside to allow the blood to flow in one direction. So the blood flows like that, it can't come back that way. I should have drawn that the other way up because it makes more sense. It's gravity. In fact, I'm going to do that now. I'm just going to take that out. I've made a mistake there. Okay, so we've got a valve that allows the blood to flow upwards but not back down the back of your leg. And this is what causes varicose veins. They bulge as these valves swell over time. So arteries away from the heart, valves, they go back, and they've got veins and they've got valves in. Capillaries, one cell thick, and the reason they're one cell thick is that we need diffusion to be happening. So we go back up here, they're one cell thick because diffusion needs to be able to happen across the capillary wall because they're what end in tissues so that different substances can diffuse in and out of your blood. So then you need to just talk about blood a little bit, and you need to know the components of blood. So we're going to start off with plasma. You may have seen plasma on the news recently because they've talked about plasma treatment. So plasma is the liquid in which everything else is dissolved. It carries hormones, it carries dissolved carbon dioxide, it carries dissolved minerals. Then we've got red blood cells. They specifically carry oxygen and they have a very, very specific shape. So if we look at one from above, it's got the sort of dent in the middle that makes it look like a refresher. And if we look from the side, it goes over like that. The reason for that is it has no nucleus, gives it a large surface area so that it can carry more oxygen. Okay. It also contains hemoglobin. You need to make yourself some flashcards on that. We then have white blood cells. Should have gone back to a pen there. We've got white blood cells and they play a role in our immune responses, but when we do communicable diseases over here, we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And then we've got platelets. And platelets' real role is to form blood clots. They're actually broken pieces of other cells, and what they do is they form blood clots, and they're very important, again, in your body's protection from communicable diseases. So we're going to talk about that more over here. You see a lot of things in B1 linked together. So where's this going to appear? Well, arteries and veins, that's quite likely to be a compare question. So that's where you say what's the same and what's different about them. They might ask you to talk about their function, so compare the structure and function, or talk about how their structure is linked to their function. That's the sort of thing we're getting over here. That might be a longer question. Obviously, all of these things could be short questions, where it's which one of these is an artery, which is a vein. They really like asking 6-mark questions about the heart, although often they will link it to something else. So they're going to link it to respiration, link it to a disease, or link it to response to exercise. So that's a possibility over there. That happens less. These longer answer questions happen less with blood. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen, but these are more likely to be shorter questions leading in to something else in our experience. So, moving on to another bit of the topic. So over here, I'm going to put respiration. I'm just going to put it over to the side a little bit because I really need a reasonable amount of room. Now, respiration is, as you know, very, very important. But we need to talk about, when we talk about plants over here, we're going to talk about photosynthesis. You have to learn the equations for respiration and photosynthesis. One thing that you need to know is you actually only need to learn one of them and realise that respiration and photosynthesis are the same reaction but in different directions. So respiration, we've got glucose and oxygen forming water and carbon dioxide, and in photosynthesis that I'm going to put here, we've got carbon dioxide and water forming glucose and oxygen. One releases energy, one takes energy in. So those of you that can remember your chemistry, we've got a reaction that we can make that's happening in opposite directions, and one's endo and one's exothermic. It's not a reversible reaction, it's just going in those two different directions there. So what do you need to know? Well, you need to know when anaerobic respiration happens. You need to know the definition of that, and you need to know where it happens. You need to know aerobic respiration in humans and anything else. So then we've got anaerobic. Now, anaerobic is different in humans and plants. So we need to be able to talk about animal cells, and we need to be able to talk about yeast or plant cells, and you need to be able to talk about the fact that instead of producing lactic acid, they produce ethanol. So this is just a set of flashcards over here. But then we've got response to exercise. And the reason I've got response to exercise over here is that this links these two topics together. So you need to be able to talk about the fact that respiration provides the energy for muscles to contract. Okay, so during respiration, energy is released, and it happens in the mitochondria. You should remember all of this. It happens in the mitochondria. It releases, it doesn't produce. We're never going to use that word. In fact, just going to put it down here. We're going to put produce there, and then I'm going to put a big cross through it. We don't say it produces energy because we can't produce energy. We can release it. So it releases energy. So when you're doing exercise, more respiration has to happen, or it has to happen at a faster rate to release the energy, to allow the muscles to contract, to let you do the exercise. To do that, your heart has to pump faster to provide blood more quickly to your muscles, which are carrying oxygen and glucose that are required for respiration. So we've got a whole 6-mark answer there linking these things together. There's no point just learning the definition of these two things. You have to be tying this together in a big picture. So what's the point of respiration? Why does it happen? Why does it happen more quickly if we do more exercise? And what is the body's response to that to be able to carry out respiration more quickly? Okay, so I think for this part 2, we've got time to add one more thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more thing up here, up the top, that's a bit of plants. And then I'm going to stop to part 3 and talk about that differently. Now, so plant transport and photosynth. Now, one of the things that I always do when I'm talking about plant transport and photosynthesis is I start off by drawing a plant. Now, as you've got already, I am a gifted artist, so you'll be very pleased that I've decided to draw a plant. There it is, it's got leaves and it's got roots. But I find it much easier to revise this topic of a plant if what you do is get yourself an A4 piece of paper and draw yourself a plant. Because then we can talk about the tissues in plants and the transport system, transpiration and translocation, and we can put it all together. And as you see, this idea of putting something all together is very, very important, because memorizing the facts, our flashcards, are going to get us our 1, 2 and maybe 3-mark answers, but those big marks, the 4 and 6, they're going to come by being able to put things together. So we're going to start off down the bottom, and we're actually going to go back all the way back over here. We've got root hair cells down the bottom. We already knew that. So we've got our root hair cell, and we know that our root hair cell takes in water by osmosis and mineral ions by diffusion. So you'll see again, I've got a link. So I've got on my root hair cell, and I know that I've got diffusion and I've got osmosis, and I have to keep these things all together. Now, I also know that I've got xylem and phloem over here. So the root hair cell then feeds into my xylem, which is taking the water up the root by capillary action. If we've learnt about xylem over here and your flashcards were effective, you already know that it's a hollow tube made with lignin to reinforce it, and it's carrying water up to the leaf, which it needs for photosynthesis, which is respiration backwards, remember. So, and then we've got that going to the leaf. Now, now we need to learn something new. So now we need to learn the structure of the leaf. I recommend that you find a cutaway side-on diagram. You have to know the names of the parts. So it's going to look something like this, and it's got a layer at the top, and it's got long cells like that, and then it's got a little spongy bit in the bottom, and it's got a hole down there that I haven't drawn. So you need to learn the names of those parts and what they're for and how they're related to photosynthesis. They've got chloroplasts in there, you know that, because we've done plant cells over here. They've got chloroplasts, you know what the chloroplasts do, you know that they're doing photosynthesis. We've also got gas exchange, because the gas diffuses in and out. We're coming back over here again. And of course, because they're doing photosynthesis, they're producing glucose. So now this glucose has to go everywhere around the plant because the plant needs it for respiration. It's going to provide the energy for growth, repair, and many other things that the plant needs to do. It's also going to use the glucose as a building block to make starch. So it has to go down. And because we revised phloem, we should already know that the phloem tubes are going to be carrying that glucose around the plant. And we've got two words here. We've got transpiration, which is the water going up, sounds like perspiration, should help you remember it. And then we've got translocation, which is the the glucose being moved around the plant. Now, I'm going to stop at that point there, and I'm going to carry on with photosynthesis and the required practical, and then down here I'm going to put diseases, because that's the last part of this topic. So that's going to be part 3. So these are the ones that you did last time, and you should have made some flashcards and learnt those facts, because you're going to need them to add to these ones. So now what I'd like you to do is to run through this. So this is finished and this is finished. I'm going to put a pencil mark up here because that's not finished. We're going to rub that out next time and come down on this one. So now you should have a sheet that looks like this. We're going to finish this sheet off, and then we're going to go back and make a larger plant to look at how you could put one topic onto a single image. So what I want you to do this time is to make these flashcards. So now we're about 2/3 of the way through this topic, and soon we'll be able to start looking at 6-mark questions and exploring how we would answer them.